Now that you've opened up Minitab to a blank worksheet, let's generate some random data and then we can test it for normality. So in this first column, I'm going to give that a label of data 1. Now we're going to generate some random data. So we'll go to the Calc pull down, Random Data, and I'm going to scroll up. It's going to go off your screen, but I'm going to select Normal. Generate data from a normal distribution. I'm going to generate 100 data points. I'm going to store that in data 1. I'm going to have a mean of 15, and I'll have a standard deviation of 1.5. So let's generate that data. Now your data should look different than mine because it's randomly generated. Now let's test it for normality. One of the quickest ways for us to test for normality using Minitab is to go to the Stat pull-down menu, select Basic Statistics, and do our graphical summary. The graphical summary is going to have a dialog box that's going to ask us to say, what data do you want to look at? Well, we're going to look at data set 1 in column C1. I'm going to select that. And then the only thing I have to do is press the OK button. Now that has generated a graphical summary. I can see my histogram. I have a Gaussian distribution that has been plotted over it. It gives me a p-value, and in this case the p-value is 0.874. That's a very large p-value. What we're looking for in our hypothesis that we're testing, the null hypothesis, is that our data set is no different than a normally distributed data set. Well, our p-value is 0.874. So that says that the null hypothesis is what we have to accept. The 0.874 tells us that yes, our data set is no different than a normally distributed data set, therefore it is normally distributed, and that's what we're looking for. If that p-value was much less than 0.05, then we'd be saying that it is a different data set than a normally distributed set of data. So that's our test for normality of the data that we just generated. We could also, using a graphic method, on the graph menu, we could go to the probability plot, and that would allow us to test for normality as well. In the probability plot, we'll do a single, select OK. The graph variable is data 1. The distribution, I want to test it versus a normal distribution. I'll say OK. And now all I have to do is press the OK button, and we'll get a test for normality using a probability plot. So here's our probability plot for our data set, and we can see that all of our data, and only 95% of it, has to fall within the confidence intervals, and at least 95% of it is in there. And we can see that our p-value is 0.874. All right, and that tells us that yes, we have a normally distributed set of data. So we've generated some data, we've tested it for normality, and it is normally distributed. Well, that's how you test for normality using Minitab.